this. We are continuing our day today. I think you had already 2 academic sessions. This session is a special EMEA session in which we have been working now for a few years on regional integration matrix, and then really renewing the view about regional integration the way we know it, in fact, because now we're trying also to connect with the sustainability matrix, SDGs and post-SDGs. So in fact, this session will be presented by, we have a presentation by Elena, our colleague here, who has been working on the visualization of the regional integration matrix that we have developed, in fact, since 2020. And it is really trying to give an idea about integration between Europe, the Mediterranean, and Africa. In fact, if we look at regional integration, it has been founded on one economic integration. This, of course, includes the establishment of the free trade agreements, custom unions, and overall common market, single market, for example, for the European Union. And it has been really very much integrated on the north sides again. On the south side, I mean, there is a lot to do in terms of trade, in terms of investment, also in terms of finance, and also human ties, and more than that, in terms of research and development and so on. So the idea is really to enhance economic cooperation, deep integration, and alleviate or lifting the obstacle to trade. And this, at least in terms of the economic research and literature, it has a positive impact on economic growth and overall stability. But now, of course, focusing the regional integration only on, I would say, the trade type of dimension, trade and investment, perhaps is not enough. We need to really think a little bit more in terms of the indicators that are underpinning economic integration, and mainly, I would say, inclusive and sustainable economic integration. I think this is also essential to ensure that we are aligned with the environmental obstacles that we are currently facing in the Mediterranean and Africa. And I think yesterday, we've seen from Giovanni's keynote speech that economic integration cannot come without political stability. Without, of course, this means that we need to have further political and institutional cooperation between Europe, Mediterranean, and Africa to ensure that there is a stability, economic stability overall. Because if you would like to attract investment, you need to ensure that the indicators that not all on the red side. So in fact, we see the map that was shown by Giovanni yesterday. It's all instability in the Africa and also in the Middle East. So this really limits, in fact, not only the trades of goods and services, but also the exchange of people, cultural exchanges, and will limit, in fact, the cooperation in political defense and also in terms of environmental cooperation. This is quite, in fact, what we call the first pillar of integration is institutional cooperation and institutional convergence and integration overall. This is really essential. So without that, economic integration does not, in fact, work. And then there is another aspect that I mentioned yesterday when I started, introduced yesterday in the conference, was the infrastructure development. For Africa, I mean, there is a gap in terms of infrastructure development, and we need to have much more infrastructure in Africa to ensure that there is, I would say, trans-regional transportation, for example, network or energy grids or communication infrastructure to facilitate really communication and connectivity. Because without this, it's also very difficult to aspire for more integration between Europe, the Mediterranean, Africa. But again, I think what is essential here is to consider the fact that we are in very exceptional times where, as Giovanni mentioned yesterday, we are facing polycrisis. And then the solutions, the policy solutions are not very easy to implement, even to design and implement. So of course, we see in a way migration as a threat. I mean, and this is not the way it should be. In fact, migration and human development should be perceived as a determinant for economic development and stability. But then when we are facing a poly-crisis and then all countries are in a way getting inward looking, it's very complex to allow these schemes of what I call legal migration schemes, which in fact would be beneficial to the host and the home countries. Finally, I think wanted to emphasize the role of cooperation in terms of technology and research. Of technology and sharing research, I think is also essential to ensure that there is integration and convergence, and that all the regions are really benefiting from the fruit of these resources in terms of technology and research, because technology and research, they foster innovation and development. And if we want to have an innovation-based and knowledge-based economy, these are essential for cooperation and for partnerships. And we've been saying this for years, but I would like to further repeat it. So obviously, what is essential here is to be able to assess what all these dimensions. We need credible indicators. We need data, which allow us to assess, for example, the trade volume imbalances, investment and financial flows, cross-border infrastructure projects, migration patterns, flows, and stock. But beyond this, also qualitative assessments on the policy harmonization. You see, Europe, to develop, there has been minimum versus maximum harmonization in different aspects. For the Mediterranean and Africa, together with Europe, we need, in a way, minimum policy harmonization. Also, as I mentioned, we need further data on cultural exchanges and educational programs, which are in connection, in cooperation between the different regions. So more qualitative data is needed to be collected to assess these other dimensions rather than trade and finance and investment. Now also we are facing, as was discussed yesterday, the environmental and sustainability challenges that are now becoming really horizontal to our economic models, and we need to deal with them. They're enhancing the cost of not action or not acting upon them. So for any partnership agreement, I think the climate mitigation, adaptation must be horizontal. And also, I mean, I think we have here, I'm happy to welcome Nathalie Helmi, who is an expert on environmental aspects. And also she has been doing a lot of work on the valuation of ecosystemic services in the oceans. I think this is also essential to think on preservation of biodiversity, whatever we do, because the Mediterranean, Africa, again, are hotspots. And if we do nothing, I think it's very difficult to act upon afterwards. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we have tried to develop a concept for regional integration that was up to 2020, which in fact I call it as a reference model. So we are still working now on a TRIS compliant regional integration model. So TRIS compliant stands for transparent, responsible, inclusive, and sustainable regional integration model, which is in our research agenda, and we were trying now to connect indicators from the Sustainable Development Goals and also from the TRIS model framework that we have developed into the regional integration matrix. So for what is for the next couple of minutes, well, a couple of minutes, by 10 minutes, you have Elena to present the regional integration matrix. And this is again based on the reference model that we have developed. So what is interesting here is we have collected data for Europe, Mediterranean, and Africa. So these are the regional dimensions that we have. And currently, we are working on connecting the framework that I mentioned on transparency, responsibility, inclusion, and sustainability within the regional integration model. So here, the floor is yours, Elena, to share with us the results of this work. And then later on, I'll give the floor to the discussant.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elena. I'm part of the research team here at EMEA. Can you hear me okay? Okay, I think that's better. So today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about what we've been doing on regional integration, as Rim kindly mentioned in her introduction. So just to give you a little bit of background, we've been working on regional integration at EMEA for the past several years. And the first major output that we had was a study in 2020, which introduced the concept of the regional integration matrix. And this was essentially a collection of dimensions for which we found indicators to measure different aspects of regional integration that we viewed as important. So the original dimensions in the first iteration of the regional integration matrix, sorry, a lot of words, were governance, trade, foreign direct investment, finance, infrastructure, human mobility, and higher education and research. So in the past year, RIM assigned me the task of updating the regional integration matrix. There were several ways in which I did this. The principal objective was to visualize the matrix. So what I did is I built an interactive dashboard, which I will demo at the end of this presentation, to display the indicators and kind of give a visual idea of integration. I also, as Rim mentioned, we expanded the focus of the matrix from the Euromed to Euromed Africa. So similar to the transformation of EMANES, which was originally focused in the Euromed. And then as we paint a bigger picture here, sorry. And then another addition, which I'll talk about a little bit more in detail, is that I added a different type of data, bilateral data, which most of you will be familiar with, but I'll explain more closely. I assessed more regions. I think when you look at regional integration, it's important. We could just look at Euromed Africa as a whole, but there's a lot of diversity within the region, and there's good reason to look at smaller sub-regions to see the interaction there. And then ultimately, we pushed the next step forward and created a measure with the work that we were doing as a composite indicator of regional integration. So I'll jump right in. So in the 2020 study, we sought to define regional integration, and the way in which this was done was defining it as a deepening and broadening of interaction between a diverse set of state and non-state actors. And while this is a good definition, I think, as we've discussed throughout the context, sorry, I need to breathe a little bit and speak slower. Throughout the conference, we've discussed there are many different ways to define regional integration. And I think one important one is also the process of convergence. And when you think of regional integration as convergence, it doesn't necessarily assign the same reasoning that it's a good thing or a bad thing. We kind of can look at it more objectively. We can say, okay, is the region performing at the same level? And that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone is performing, say, for environmental indicators, that they're performing to the level that we wish. But this just adds an extra dimension. And the way that that we deal with these different definitions in the 2023 update is that we use different types of data. So bilateral data is better able, here, I'll skip to the next slide. Bilateral data is better able to capture interaction because it allows, and first, actually, sorry, I should just define bilateral data. Bilateral data shows us the relationship between two actors. So for example, for trade, between the US and China, we can say this many dollars of trade happened. Between, say, I don't know, Afghanistan and Germany, for migration, we can say this many people moved between X and Y. And this allows us to better look more closely at interaction, because we can define which sets of regions, which sets of countries we are looking at the interaction of. Sorry, I'm explaining that so poorly. So one of the things I did is in the original study, the only region that we actually looked at was the Union for the Mediterranean, whereas in this case, I expanded and looked at 23 different sub-regions within the Euromed Africa area. So 3 of these were regional institutions. We kept the Union for the Mediterranean in there, but then we also added the European Union and different the League of Arab States, like different organizations within the regions. And then we also use geographic regions, and this kind of best represents a country's local area. And those are defined by the UN GeoScheme. So when it came to providing a score for regional integration, there are many different ways in which it was possible to do this. And every decision that you make is going to kind of influence the outcome. But this is the way I decided to do it, and I'd be happy to discuss whether we think this is an interesting or good strategy. But for the bilateral data, what I wanted to do is measure regional integration as the amount of activity that a country is doing that is within the region relative to their total activity. So what this kind of does is say, let's take the example of the African Union. And then you take the country Nigeria. How much of the total trade that Nigeria is doing is happening within the African Union versus like everything that they're doing? And the idea here is that the more activity that they're doing within the region, the more integrated the region is. And so this, we're able to define, I don't know if you can see my mouse, you define a simple equation here, which I calculated using an algorithm in R, is that you sum up all of their regional activity and you divide it by total activity. And I multiplied by 100 so that I had a standard score. And then for each region, the way I defined the regional integration score is that I take the average of this activity within of the region. So in here, I'll give an example. I don't know. Okay, you can see it. I can't quite see it, but so this is a simple network of countries. It's not any real data. I just did it for illustrative purposes. So the idea here is that Spain, France, and Germany are within the same region. So what you do is you take the amount of activity that they're doing here, which would be 6 + 4, and we divide it by their total activity. I hope that's clear. I can clarify more if it's not. And the idea is the higher this value is, the more integration. So moving on to non-bilateral data. So what I'm doing with the non-bilateral data, which is the part of the regional integration matrix that was in the original study, is that I'm applying it to the definition of regional integration as a process of convergence. And the way I do this is that I measure it as using mean differences. So this is like a common way of looking at convergence within the literature, where what you do is you take all of your country values and you subtract the regional mean. And this again gives us the added benefit where each region is going to have different values. And the idea here is that if the average difference from the mean is small, then you're converging towards the mean and you're more integrated. And if the difference is big, then you have a lot of diversity among your data, among your indicator values. So just to give a quick visualization and an idea of how this looks. This is not, again, not real data. If you have values that look very similar, that just range between 40 and 60, you're going to have very low mean differences. And the way in which I make this reflect regional integration is I subtract it from 100, so that the higher the score, the more integration there is. Relative to, this is an example where the values are very, very different, ranging between 0 and 100, where the mean difference is higher, and therefore regional integration is reflected as lower. So after calculating all of these scores, what I do is create a composite indicator, and we have slightly different dimensions, but not by much. And there was, of course, with every study, there wasn't issues of missing data. But the way I handled this was using a method called interpolation, which is a way of kind of defining unknown values between points. And it's specifically suited to time series data, because if you look at the example here, the blue points are what we know. And then Steinman is just one method of kind of drawing a line between them. And I like this one in particular because if you use, say, for example, like cubic interpolation, sometimes your tails, like the unknown data from the past and from the future, they start to go crazy. So you could end up saying like, okay, there's negative migration, which is, well, I mean, it is possible given flows, but you want something that's somewhat reasonable. So this is a true example from the data of how I dealt with the missing things between years. Okay, so I apologize for speaking very fast. I'm just going to show you the dashboard that I actually built. And here we go. Okay. Let's see. Okay, there we go. So I'm sorry I rushed a little bit through that explanation. It's quite complex, and I haven't really talked about it that much. And so I'm very open to feedback and excited to hear the feedback of the discussants. But this is the app that I built. So the method I used was R-Shiny. I don't know if people in the room are familiar with it, but R is a free statistical software where you can build, and one package within it gives you the capability to build interactive web dashboards that can hold and host a lot of data. So what I've done here, and this is integrated into the EMEA website, it'll be available once it's fully developed. So what I did here is I wrote a quick introduction, kind of as I spoke to you now. I wrote a detailed methodology tab that probably explains things a little bit better than I did just now. And then we can move to the interactive map. So I've been talking this whole time about indicators and scores and lots of things. There's a lot of components, but I think the indicator map lays it out pretty simply. So in the top corner, you can select a region. So these are the geographic region, or no, sorry, these are the regional institutions that I talked about. These are all of the ones that are included. And as you select each one, let's actually go to a different, let's go to migration flows. As you select each one, you're brought to see the different score, the different map, the different area. Let's do this one. It just zooms right over the area and it gives you a different legend. And it gives you, you can select, move between the different years. You can move between the different indicators. It links the sources, and it tells you the type of data that we're dealing with. So, and then the last part of the dashboard I want to show you is the composite indicator. So in the top part here, we can switch between geographic and regional institutions. And here is all the scores for the regions mapped individually by indicator. And then at the bottom, I have it done by overall score. I think I might stop there just so we can have a bit of discussion, and I think it might be better if I can answer questions, but yeah, there it is.
Thank you, Elena. You did a great job. So I would like to move directly to the discussant. And here we have online two discussants. We are start with George Zestos. George, he is a professor at the Christopher Newport University in the United States. I met George in, I think we met in Oslo at the World Finance Conference. And he did very interesting work. In fact, he told me that he has done a lot of work on regional integration. So, Georges, any comments on what you heard, and if you have any feedback on what can be done and how we can improve the methodology? Please, the floor is yours. You're muted. We don't hear you. Please unmute your. Can you unmute him yourself?
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes, now, yes, Josh.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, first of all, I want to say that first time I'm introduced to this type of work, so I'm amazed the dimensions, the coverage, and so forth. My experience with regional integration is one dimension practically versus n dimensions. And the dimension I was doing, I wrote a couple of papers, it was convergence in different regions of the world or in the entire world. And there we used the sigma convergence, and also we used the beta convergence. The sigma convergence is whether the standard deviation of a particular variable, like a real GDP growth, converges through time. And so you observe this and see what part of the world is experiencing convergence, which one is not. This is very easy to be done, and we were interested in GDP per capita. And then you can look the same question within a region of countries like Europe, or you can look at the African countries, or you can look at the whole world, and so forth. And then the other measure of convergence is called beta convergence. This pertains to the neoclassical growth model of Solow, and observe the countries through time, how they're doing. So both the type of convergence say something, that if the world is becoming a better union, there should be positive convergence, because you can also have negative convergence. The beta coefficient will take a negative value. So this, what I see here, is totally new. And so my question is, what kind of variables are coming in? Amount of trade, the things I was looking. So that's what I need explanations. And then I can see that this will require a lot of work with many researchers working on the project, like a group project like we have. And who is going to update all those from year to year or from month to month, whatever. So there's so many questions that I have. I read a little bit and I didn't know what I should be reading. I got an idea, but then I need to know more. So I can stop here.
Thank you, George, for your comment. Certainly, this is a first draft of the work which has been presented by Elena, and we can certainly discuss with you at a later stage how we could include these other sigma and beta convergence indicators. Of course, these are the traditional methods that we know about assessing convergence for integration. But certainly we can add that these assessments as well. Thank you very much for your comment. I would like to invite Abu Bakr Ben Sliman. He is from Joko Labs. So Abu Bakr, any views on this work from a practical standpoint?
Yes, hello everyone. Effectively, it's very interesting and very useful now, and we are seeing more and more the value of measuring interaction within the regions. But to bring more entrepreneurial view to these subjects, I have a question for Elena. So, can you adapt this model to more micro elements? For example, the integration of SMEs, and also this method, can the method be reversed? For example, can we reintegrate region according to the interaction, or perhaps we can see the interaction between the country and other region of the world? For example, with this model, we could see that Morocco is more integrated with West African than to North African and other countries like that.
Sure. I missed the first part of your question, but I think that's an excellent idea to look at each country and say which region are they most integrated into, because it would really, I don't know, give a good summary of their behavior and allow for. But can you repeat the first part of your question so I can address the whole thing?
Yes. Yes, the first question is, can we adapt this model to more micro element? Like, for example, can we see like the regional interaction for SMEs? For example, we can see that if we take your model, we can see that Spain have a lot of different interaction with Europe and with France and with Italy. But if we take, like, for example, the SMEs view, we can see that the SMEs from Spain work more with South America than with Europe. So the question is, can we have like this model for more micro elements?
That's an excellent question. I think that would be amazing if we could have that. I think the constraint would definitely be data, but again, the relationship I described of bilateral interaction could definitely capture that idea of, instead of interactions between countries, interaction between firms and SMEs, where if that data were to become available, then yes, this methodology could definitely be applied. But the question of capturing that interaction would definitely be a tricky one and an interesting one that I think is worth investigating.
Elena, there is a World Bank Enterprise Survey. So his comment is very important one. Of course, we did not yet look at the SMEs dimension because we are still trying to understand regional integration based on the different. I think we have 7 dimensions ranging from trade and investment, financial flows, infrastructure, research and development, human interaction. So really quite macro and institutional data as well. But on the micro level, we haven't looked at it. Possibly this is something that we could do as a separate research or a paper to see practically explore the data from the World Bank Enterprise surveys. I think we could look at the profile of exports of those companies, but sometimes it's very difficult to find data on the countries of these exports. I mean, yes, we can have a volume of exports, but not necessarily from where and to where. So that's also a problem. So we only have macro data on export profiles or import profiles, and that's the data that I think we used. Which database there, Elena? Which database we used for the import and export trade data?
We used the UNACTA.
Okay, so this is the publicly available data that we have, but these are macro data, and it does not allow us to look at the SME profile. But with the World Bank survey data, we can do some estimations, but this cannot be part of the dashboard unless it's just, I would say, a small connection to it, because a survey is a survey. I mean, it's not comprehensive. You only have, I don't know how many enterprises surveyed on this specific topic. But thank you. I mean, that's what we would like to, but perhaps with more data available on balance sheets of SMEs, I mean, that would allow us to do more. But for the moment, the answer, we could explore it, Elena, via the World Bank enterprise surveys.
Thank you for this nice presentation. It was refreshing, and it was really good to see regional integration scores. About your app, what I would like to see was to take the data from country level, so that take your regional integration scores and work with another subjects or its impact. And the second thing that pops in my mind is the micro level data. Actually, if you publish your methodology, it could be done with micro level surveys within countries. Let's say for Turkey, we are coming from Turkey. The province level data is very important, and the relationship between provinces is very important. You can calculate it by province level. Then you can look at the intra-trade between firms, and things go just build up. As far as trade data, there's Comtrade, UN Comtrade database, which you have bilateral trades among countries, and it's a good data. And investment climate assessment surveys of World Bank could serve you as well. So, but they don't cover all of the countries.
We looked at that previously in the previous version of the regional integration matrix. Now we're doing an update, and also our main constraint is that we added Africa, so we need to have a harmonized type of assessment for Europe, Africa, and Mediterranean countries. So before we used these databases, but anyway, I think this is something which is very much data oriented. So we are, in a way, constrained by data collection.
Yes, I think we've been looking at Comtrade as well as an opportunity to kind of break down trade a little bit more, because right now we have total trade value, which really says something, but it's very broad. And I think the Comtrade data is, you can do trade in environmental goods, trade in services. So that would be a beneficial avenue for us to keep going down. Yeah. So thank you for your comment.
Okay, we only have, so we start with Simi and then Najat, but then we try to break.
Thank you, and congratulations for your application for in our Shiny. Maybe I have a suggestion to include the climate change risk, like World Bank provides some free database about physical and transitional risk. You can include this maybe in your composite indicator. And I have a question is if we can download the Excel file, the data for this composite, or no, via your application. It's free. We can download the composite indicator from your.
So no, not yet. So right now the dashboard is published on the website, but it's currently password protected because it's under development still. This is kind of its first time in the light since 2020. But I do think that would be a good public good that we could provide out of this. It would even be nice eventually to have country reports and things like that. So we'll definitely consider it to have the file downloadable. And also for the environmental indicators, I've been I'm working now with the data from the Environmental Performance Index coming out of Yale University, but I didn't have it clean in time to add to the app for this session. But we're definitely considering environmental performance as an important part of economic integration. Yeah, thank you for your comment.
Just wanted to add why we developed this. It was actually the performance indicators for regional integration for the Union for the Mediterranean in 2020. And these indicators, they were used for the regional outlook for regional integration in the UFM region by the OECD. So they have a report, in fact, that has been published one time based on the dimensions, the regional integration dimensions. But then back then, the whole debate was which dimensions we need to include in this regional outlook. And then our idea was that we need to include institutional dimension is essential, because without political stability, without institutional convergence, there is no economic integration. But then they chose to have an approach where it's only economic indicators, which in fact not take into account the institutional integration, which in my view is the big weakness of the regional outlook that they have it. Obviously, before we used to use the data from the World Bank governance indicators, which they stopped for some other reasons, political reasons. And we are now trying really to look at other indicators like, for example, freedom indexes and, anti-corruption, Transparency International, conflict type of indexes. And this makes our task a little bit complex. But for us, institutional integration, convergence is a prerequisite for economic and financial integration. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I mean, we've seen it also in the European Union and how the development in the EU has evolved. And I think political stability and also institutional convergence is really important. And this is what really makes us different from. But on the environmental data, this will be part of the interconnection I mentioned in my introduction between the regional integration matrix and also another, in fact, dashboard that we are developing at EMEA, which is the transparent, responsible, inclusive, and sustainable. We are developing it separately, but at a point in time, as I mentioned, we are going to integrate the two initiatives. Najid?
Thank you, Rim, and thank you, Lena. It's very, very good, good job. It would be possible to explore the trade-off between efficiency and equity. I guess you have all the data about the DDP, but do you have any data on TFP? And then about equity. About equity, yes, of course, Gini index is available, but I guess to have a very good proxy about the equity, we need to have information about labor share of income. I don't know if you have it in these different indexes.
But for which purpose? For to assess the convergence or divergence in terms of equity, in terms of total factor productivity, or what exactly?
Yeah, because you can have this. You can disentangle, the trade integration when you have, and you can have information specifically on efficiency, and it's completely different, that information from equity. And then in terms of globalization and integration, you can have a better
in terms, for example, of employment creation, or what exactly?
In terms of employment creation, for example, and also about skilled and non-skilled workers, and about the impact on innovation on the.
Yeah, I guess these are all, I think, research work that can be done in parallel, but to overwhelm too much the dashboard, then it becomes a little bit. I mean, for the moment, this is the first step. And obviously, with time, we will develop further indicators that could eventually look at equity and. and efficiency. Yeah, so this is something that we're working together on this, so we can develop something a little bit much more. But thank you very much, Elena, for the presentation, George and Abu Bakr and everybody else. So I would like to give back to Sandra to share the next session.
Thank you very much. So we will start the 4th academic session on food security and green growth. Basically,